This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate Polanski, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Did you ever read a book that changed your life? I did. This book has affected the direction of my life for almost 50 years. The story of Charles Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders has fascinated millions of people for decades. And most people who are interested in Manson and those murders have read the book Helter Skelter by Manson prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry. Helter Skelter is the best-selling true crime book of all time, having sold well over 7 million copies worldwide since it was first published in 1974. Subtitled The True Story of the Manson Murders, Helter Skelter has also been a primary source of most media and public perception of Charles Manson and the events that occurred in Southern California in the summer of 1969. That perception is of a sociopathic ex-con who took advantage of the spirit of the late 1960s to brainwash a group of young, middle-class people into committing a series of brutal murders in the furtherance of his vision of a race war called Helter Skelter. They were monstrous crimes done for a monstrous reason at the direction of a monstrous man. But is the true story of the Manson murders really true? Were those murders really committed in order to start a race war? Was Charles Manson really able to brainwash impressionable young people so that they would commit mass murder for him? Or is there a more reasonable explanation for those murders? Because Helter Skelter was written by the prosecutor who successfully convicted Manson and his co-defendants, it is considered by many people to be the Bible of the Tate LaBianca murders. But after nearly half a century, it's time to change that. In the tradition of Access Manson and Goodbye Helter Skelter, this is the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.
Hi, I'm George Stimpson. Today, October 12, 2021, is the 52nd anniversary of Charles Manson's arrest at the Barker Ranch, and this is the fourth episode of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. In this installment, we're going to examine the murder of Gary Hinman by Bobby Beausoleil. But before we get into the chronology of that homicide, I'm going to mention another occurrence that is very relevant to our overall story. To recall, Bernard Crowe was shot by Charles Manson on the night of June 30, July 1, 1969. On July 4, a young woman named Linda Kasabian came to live at Spahn's movie ranch, having no place else to go. 20-year-old Linda was an established member of the anti-establishment and no stranger to underworld behavior. That night, she slept with Charles Tex Watson and, by both of their accounts, had an extraordinary sexual experience. But not only was the couple bonded by love, they were also bonded by their similar criminal inclinations. The next day, July 5, Kasabian, at Watson's urging, went to a trailer where her estranged husband was staying and stole $5,000 that belonged to the trailer owner. For proper perspective, realize that $5,000 in 1969 is worth over $37,000 today. In 1969, you could buy a brand new Volkswagen Beetle for $1,800. This theft of money happened less than a week after the incident with Bernard Crowe, wherein Charles Manson had to shoot Crowe during the resolution of a problem of Charles Watson's making. I would imagine that after the Crowe incident, Manson gave Watson a good talking to about bringing problems around the ranch. But apparently, that talking to had little effect. As a result of Watson and Kasabian's theft of the $5,000, Kasabian's husband and his friend showed up at Spahn's ranch demanding the money back. In anticipation of this, Kasabian sought out Manson so he would hide her during the ensuing confrontation, wherein Manson ran Kasabian and his friend off. Once again, Charles Watson brought trouble to Spahn's ranch, this time with the connivance of Linda Kasabian. And once again, Charles Manson took care of a problem, not of his own making, and earned a further degree of indebtedness from Charles Watson and from Linda Kasabian. And it's also necessary here to introduce another character into our story, namely Robert Kenneth Beausoleil, generally known as Bobby. Bobby Beausoleil was a musician and adventuring member of the counterculture who occasionally frequented Spahn's movie ranch because he was acquainted with Charles Manson and many of the other people who lived there. Beausoleil was also a friend of a man named Gary Hinman, who lived at 964 Old Topanga Canyon Road in Los Angeles. In late July of 1969, Bobby Beausoleil would murder Gary Hinman. The murder of Gary Hinman was actually a rather complicated affair, but its ramifications are such that we'll have to go into it in some detail here. The outline of the story is that on July 25, 1969, Bobby Beausoleil, Susan Atkins, and Mary Brunner went to the Topanga Canyon home of Gary Hinman. Atkins and Brunner lived at Spahn's ranch, and Brunner was the mother of Charles Manson's son. Shortly after the trio's arrival, an argument over money ensued, which escalated into violence. Someone called Charles Manson at Spahn's ranch for assistance. He went to the scene with another resident of Spahn's ranch, Bruce Davis. At some point, Manson slashed the left side of Hinman's face with a small sword. Hinman signed his vehicle pink slips indicating that they had been sold. Manson and Davis left, taking one of Hinman's vehicles, a 1965 Fiat station wagon. 2 days later, Bobby Beausoleil stabbed Hinman to death. He wrote "Political Piggy" on the wall above Hinman's body in Hinman's blood. Then he, Atkins, and Brunner left the scene with Hinman's other vehicle, a 1958 Volkswagen bus. Hinman's body was discovered on July 31, 1969.
To be honest with you, I don't remember a lot that happened immediately after my having killed Gary. That really devastated me. My memories of what happened afterwards have never been really clear.
How was the body discovered? Charlie, would you tell me that?
On the 31st of July, Paul and I came out here at the request of our Malibu station, and the body was found in the home by friends of Gary. And after we entered the home, we saw signs of a struggle, and it appeared as though there had been some degree of violence. He was found in the living room directly up here, and he was lying on his back with multiple stab wounds. He had been dead approximately 1 week at the time that he was found.
Had he also been shot, or were there any signs of gunshots here at all?
Yes, there was. He had not been shot. However, there is signs that there was a gun fired in the house.
Perhaps during the struggle that Charlie referred to.
That's correct.
Almost a week later, on August 6, Bobby Beausoleil was arrested at a pullout on California's Highway 101 near San Luis Obispo in Hinman's Fiat. Police had wants out on the vehicle as belonging to a murder victim. A knife was found in the car, and Beausoleil was arrested and charged with murder. The three questions we'll be looking at here are: why did the people go to Gary Hinman's house? Why did Charles Manson slash Gary Hinman's face? And why did Bobby Beausoleil stab Gary Hinman to death? In trying to answer these questions, we'll look at recollections from Bobby Beausoleil, Susan Atkins, Mary Brunner, Bruce Davis, and Charles Manson. So, to start, why did the people go to Gary Hinman's house on July 25, 1969? There are two offered answers to this question. The get the inheritance theory was offered as a motive at both of Beausoleil's trials for the Hinman murder, as well as the later trials of Charles Manson and Bruce Davis. In this scenario, Charles Manson needed money for a move to the desert and believed that Gary Hinman had come into a substantial inheritance, or that he had had a lottery win, or that he had stocks and bonds. He sent Bobby Beausoleil, Susan Atkins, and Mary Brunner to the house to get the inheritance using force if necessary. The drug deal turned lethal scenario has been offered as a motive by Bobby Beausoleil and Charles Manson. In this scenario, Bobby Beausoleil went to Hinman's on his own to try to get a refund on a drug deal gone sour, and he was prepared to get the refund by use of violence if necessary. In either scenario, violence must have been considered as a possibility in the anticipated confrontation with Hinman, since Beausoleil took a loaded 9mm radon pistol with him to Hinman's residence. So let's break down these two versions of the crime and see which one is more credible and reasonable based on corroboration with other independent evidence. Although several persons testified that Beausoleil went to Hinman's house to get money, that vague motive applies to both scenarios. So to concentrate on who actually claimed the source of money was an inheritance, or a lottery win, or stocks that Hinman supposedly had, we will focus on Ella Jo Bailey, a resident of Spahn's Ranch, and Danny DiCarlo, a member of the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club who was on an extended visit to the ranch in the summer of 1969. Both of these individuals testified that Manson sent Beausoleil to Hinman's house with instructions to get his money, whatever the source. Both of these individuals also testified under agreements to have criminal charges against them dropped if they would testify truthfully. And of course, testifying truthfully means testifying as to what the prosecution says is the truth. So I think it's reasonable to assume that Bailey's and DiCarlo's testimonies could have been shaded. Both give different sources and amounts of the supposed money, and neither gives a credible source for the origin of their information. In fact, DiCarlo claimed that his source was Charles Manson. And there is no corroborating evidence that supports either of their stories. Hinman had no inheritance, lottery winnings, or stocks and bonds, so why anybody would think so is a mystery. Susan Atkins and Mary Brunner say that they went to the house to get money, but both are uncertain as to the money's amount or source. Bobby Beausoleil has said that he never heard anything about Hinman having any inheritance. At his 2016 parole hearing, he stated, "I never heard, by the way, about any $20,000 inheritance until my trial, until someone got up on the stand and said that he overheard Charlie talking about, a $20,000 inheritance. But that was in a conversation I was not a part of. I never knew anything about an inheritance. I never saw any indication that he had received one or heard anything about it. And if somebody had said that he had an inheritance, I would have not believed it. I would have just thought it was somebody's fantasy."
Nobody sent me over to recruit Gary to the family. He was as much a part of the so-called family as I was, and he wasn't a part of the family. I went there for one thing, and that was to collect the money, because they have to come along. Mary, had a relationship with Gary, and I don't know why Susan Atkins has to come along. And I didn't see any problem going there. I figured it was going to be no problem, get the money back, and come back and give it to him, and it was going to be done.
But since no alternative motive was proposed at the time of the trials, it was a good enough reason for juries to convict. And keep in mind that the prosecution doesn't even have to establish motive in order to gain a conviction. So the inheritance, lottery, stocks motive is offered up by two individuals with legal incentives to so testify as to vague rumors that have no corroboration and in fact had no basis in reality. And the get money in order to move to the desert scenario is also contradicted by later evidence of what became of Hinman's two vehicles, which were taken, according to this version of events, after the inheritance shakedown fell through and Beausoleil was trying to salvage something, anything, out of the unfortunate affair. The alternate theory only came to light years later. It was 1981 when Bobby Beausoleil first claimed that the real reason he went to Gary Hinman's house was because of a mescaline deal he brokered for the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club. The club claimed that the drugs were bad and wanted their $1,000 investment, $7,000 in today's money, back, or else Beausoleil would face seriously violent consequences. When Beausoleil asked Hinman for a refund, Hinman refused, and the ensuing, sometimes violent argument led to the incidents described earlier. Now, to get something straight right off, I'm not saying that Gary Hinman was a drug dealer, that is, someone whose primary source of income comes from dealing drugs. Rather, he was a musician and music teacher, and if he moved some product on the side to supplement his income, that doesn't make him a drug dealer, it makes him a regular guy. But even so, if you enter the world of the illegal drug trade on any level, you're opening yourself up to the possibility of somehow getting bitten, which Gary Hinman unfortunately did. There is much evidence to corroborate the drug deal gone bad version of events. For one thing, Beausoleil claims he got the mescaline for the Satans in order for them to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the founding of their club. And the Straight Satan's Club was indeed 10 years old at the time of this incident. Beausoleil claims that Hinman manufactured the mescaline by processing peyote. Although no drug manufacturing paraphernalia was discovered at Hinman's house by police investigating his death, the process for distilling mescaline from peyote can be accomplished with standard kitchen pots, pans, and cooking thermometers, none of which would appear incriminating when clean. Police did, however, find a kitchen scale with a white powder residue on it. This powder residue did not test positive for narcotics, but in 1969 there was no test in routine use by law enforcement agencies that would have identified a suspect substance as mescaline, which, when processed from peyote buds, is in the form of a white powder. Another thing supporting his claim that his visit to Hinman's was motivated by the need to get some recompense for the Straight Satan's Club was the fact that Hinman's VW van was indeed turned over to an associate of the Satans, gratis. On October 8, 1969, a gentleman named Louis Puhek was arrested while driving Gary Hinman's VW bus. Charged with murder, Puhek told investigators that he bought the bus from a Mark Aronson in mid-August. Puhek further stated that Aronson had obtained the bus from Charles Manson at Spahn's Movie Ranch. Puhek also recalled seeing a fellow named Joe Schumacher at the ranch. Puhek and Schumacher were well enough acquainted that they shared the same girlfriend. Joe Schumacher's brother John was a member of the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club. On March 12, 1970, Mark Aronson was arrested on an outstanding warrant. Upon being interviewed, he stated that he went to the Spahn Ranch in July or August of 1969 and had a conversation with Charles Manson in the accompaniment of Robert Beausoleil. Manson asked him if he would like to have a car, and he replied yes. Manson, Beausoleil, and he then went to the rear of Spahn Ranch, where a 1958 Volkswagen microbus was parked. Manson showed Aronson how to hotwire the car and started it. Manson then drove it back to the saloon building in front of the ranch and gave Aronson the pink slip to the vehicle, telling him, "If you get stopped by the cops, tell them you bought the vehicle from Gary Hinman, who is a Negro wearing a beret and a black jacket." There are many more details about this vehicular transaction, but I don't want to overwhelm you with data here. So instead, I'll refer you to the article I wrote for the MF blog in February 2016 entitled Gary Hinman's Bus, Again, most of the information for which was obtained from the Gary Hinman files in the Essential Archives at cielodrive.com. I'm sure you'll find more than enough evidence there to support what I'm saying here. And if you want a closer examination of the Hinman murder generally, read my chapter on it in Goodbye Helter Skelter. But in sum, Gary Hinman's bus was given to a known close associate of the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club. And there must have been some kind of need for recompense to the club. Otherwise, why would anybody take the vehicles, tied as they were to a murder, at all? Still another reason to believe the Straight Satan's drug deal theory is that California's Board of Prison Terms, at the parole hearings of Bobby Beausoleil, accepts it as being true. Typically, parole boards accept the court record as being the truth regarding the circumstances of a crime. which in Beausoleil's case would mean that they would accept the premise that Hinman was killed during a shakedown for a supposed inheritance, the reason for the murder given at Beausoleil's trials. Instead, the boards listen patiently as Beausoleil tells the drug burn story, and they even ask him questions about its particulars. And they do this because they accept the story as being true. As for why Charles Manson slashed Gary Hinman's face, we have to look at why Manson was there in the first place. By all accounts, Hinman resisted when Beausoleil demanded the money. There were apparently several struggles between the two, which included Beausoleil striking Hinman in the head several times with the pistol, lacerating his scalp in several places. Also during the struggle, the gun changed hands, perhaps more than once, and was fired, the bullet entering the wall under the kitchen sink. At some point, the situation degenerated so much that a phone call was made to Spahn's Ranch requesting Charles Manson's assistance. All witnesses except Bobby Beausoleil say that Beausoleil himself made that call. Manson arrived with Bruce Davis, and in the course of events seriously slashed Hinman on the left side of his face. And as an aside, these interior house pictures are puzzling to me because it seems like the crime scene has been tampered with. Note this blood stain on the floor here. It is obviously the same blood stain that's on the floor here. But somewhere between the time when these two photos were taken, the red chair seems to have been replaced with a white settee here. What is the explanation for that? Bobby Beausoleil claims that before Manson cut Hinman, he, Beausoleil, and Hinman had straightened out our differences, and that Manson's assault was unprovoked and unnecessary. But Mary Brunner testified that there was a fight that preceded the ear slashing. Bruce Davis has also recalled that Manson and Hinman got into an argument before Manson cut Hinman's face. Manson says that the cutting occurred when he was disarming Hinman. How believable is Beausoleil's claim that he and Gary Hinman had resolved our differences and worked out our difficulties, and that Hinman had good-naturedly offered to sign over the titles to his two vehicles, this after Beausoleil had entered Hinman's house, demanded money, seriously beaten Hinman about the head with a gun, which went off, and trashed Hinman's house during a series of struggles? Are we to believe that Gary Hinman suddenly became docile after all of that and willingly gave up all his property, and that when Manson arrived everything was fine, but Manson cut his face for no reason? Does that make sense? Or is it more believable that Hinman didn't calm down, and that when Manson showed up he confronted an angry and possibly armed Hinman, and Manson ended up cutting him during an argument and ensuing a fight, like Mary Brunner and Bruce Davis testified? Which version do you think is more reasonable? Finally, why did Bobby Beausoleil stab Gary Hinman to death? Bobby Beausoleil says he stabbed Hinman because he insisted on going to the hospital over his cut ear, and Beausoleil feared that if he did so, he, Hinman, would cause Beausoleil to be arrested.
Charlie had slashed his face and he left me with a problem, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to get away without getting arrested. Unless I killed him.
But why would Beausoleil fear that Hinman would turn him in for the ear slashing? Manson slashed the ear, not Beausoleil. Charles Manson says that Beausoleil stabbed Hinman because he was threatening to turn Manson in for the ear slashing after he gave his word that he would not.
I didn't think one way or another. It wasn't up to me to kill him. You dig what I'm saying? Here's the way that came down. Kid come to me and says, Hinman owes me. I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He said, you're my brother, right? I said, yeah, that's right. He said, what do I do? I said, well, if you're big enough, go get your money. If you're not, sit down and keep quiet. He said, what would you do? I said, it's money, man. It's not worth the trouble. You dig? Let's go party, I mean, what do we need money for? We make it. We print it up, It's got our faces on it, Why did he die? Wait a minute. I'll explain it to you. He said, all right, I'm big enough. I'm going to go get it. I said, okay, that's what you want. So he called me a couple of days later. He said, man, this guy's got a gun. I said, don't invoke me to no violence, man. I just got out of the penitentiary. I don't want to go back. He said, you said you were my brother. And he said, what do I do? He's got a gun. I said, well, if he's got a gun, he's a coward. He must be afraid or he wouldn't have a gun, you know. I said, you don't need a gun, man. I said, don't reach for the gun. If you reach for the gun, he'll shoot you because you're putting his mind on the gun. Smack him in the mouth first. Put his mind on his mouth, then grab the gun. Oh, you're crazy. I said, no, that's not crazy. It's just a matter of dealing with yourself because there's nobody there but you. You know, go take the gun or show me. So I said, don't, you know, so I got involved. So here I go. Bruce, McGregor, Davis, and I go over to Hinman's house. I got a knife on my leg, so I cut Hinman's ear, and I take the gun, he shoots off on the wall, and I throw the gun one way, and I throw the knife the other way, and I give the kid the knife, and I say, that's how you do it. Don't bring me into this no more. Don't bring me into no violence. Then I'm thinking, I got to scare this character. So I am what they call in the underworld, I'm a bad actor. I say, all right, now I got to kill you, Hinman. He said, oh, don't kill me. I said, if I don't kill you, you're going to tell my parole officer, he's going to put me back in prison. He said, no, I won't tell. I said, you give me your word as your bond, and your bond as your life, you won't tell. He said, I give you my word as my bond, and I look back at the Frenchman, and the Frenchman's standing there with the knife, and the gun's laying over on the table in Norway. I think the king of Norway's got the gun. The North Sea's dying, right? So all them Walders, we were Walderses, what, in the 60s? 60s, yeah. So I looked at the Frenchman with the knife, and he's got Hinman, and I said, you got this? He gave me his word as his bond. Have you got this life here? And he said, yeah. I said, are we in the truth here? And he said, yes, we're in the truth. I said, okay, I'm through with this. I'm gone out of this. And I left. We patched his ear up. We put some Scotch tape on his ear. We fixed him up. He's back on the road. No problems. I'm out of there, man. I straightened it out. I got paid. I said, pay the kid what you owe him. He paid him the money. They transferred the cars and made their deals. You dig what I'm saying? All I was the administrator there. I administrated justice to those kids. You dig? Was what it amounted to. So then Hinman got, well, he got the knife. Oh, no, he got the gun. He got the gun. He said, I'm going to go kill that. And he said, well, and Bobby said, no, I can't let you do that. He said, you gave your word. And he said, well, no, that don't mean nothing to me. You know, he said, he cut my ear. I'm going to go blah, blah, blah. And Bobby said, no, I can't let you do that because he was standing up for me. Now I'm standing in his place. In other words, I was standing in his place. That's that line I'm trying to explain to you. You dig? When you walk that line and you're in truth with that cross and that chapel and that Bible and that book with that crown and that whatever it is that you guys are, you know, all the way back to where it started with Claymore and Wilson and all them dudes and all them graveyards and all them people that went through all them changes. All I'm doing is walking on the end of you guys. I'm way down here at the end of your foot. I'm walking. I'm running like a little rabbit, you know.
Okay. So Bobby knows the one who killed him.
No, so Hinman killed Hinman. That's the way it comes down to. If you look at it from, if you, no, wait a minute, no, it come like this. Hinman says he pushed by Bobby, and Bobby handed him the knife, a Mexican silver knife with a big eagle on it, from that medicine man that smokes that stuff that's got them mushrooms around his neck, that comes from the sweat lodge, that comes from the man, that comes from the universe, that comes from God with this knife and that heart, you dig? And he says, I'll not let you harm him because he was standing in my place and he's my brother. You know Bogus? You know Bogus down in Hollywood? He'll witness to that with his life because he owes me one on that. You see what I'm saying? In other words, I got more lives on this road than mine. In other words, there's only one life, true enough, but there's many perspectives towards that life. So when he pushed by, he gave the knife to Hinman and told Hinman, kill me. And Hinman says, I don't want you. Boom. Bobby said, you gave your word as your bond, and your bond is your life. If you make one more move towards it, I'm taking you away. And he made the move. Bobby took him, and he died. I'm 3 days down the road, man. I'm in San Diego partying at the zoo. I don't have any idea what the hell's going on there.
Well, now you owe Bobby.
No. How do I owe Bobby? I faced, wait a minute, no, I faced his when I cut the ear.
Okay.
You know, I faced his.
But lately, Bobby Beausoleil has come up with another reason for why Hinman was killed. Like Susan Atkins before him, Beausoleil claims that Manson had him kill Hinman so Manson would have something to hold over Beausoleil's head so he wouldn't turn Manson in for the assumed murder of Bernard Crowe.
He saw all the people that he was with as just children. They were weak. They wouldn't know how to hold their mud. And rather than try to convince them that they should, he just manipulated them to try to make them so complicit in violent crimes that they would not snitch on. Depending on the orientation of whoever he was talking to, he would say things that would support some sort of agenda that he had. What they didn't volunteer to do was to be part of something that they didn't understand, which was his need to protect himself. He manipulated them.
We've already seen what happened to Gary Hinman's VW bus. As for his Fiat, Bobby Beausoleil was arrested in it on the Cuesta grade pullout on California Highway 101 near San Luis Obispo on August 6, 1969. Bobby Beausoleil didn't testify at his first trial, which ended with no verdict due to a hung jury. And at his second trial, he did testify and said that Charles Manson stabbed Hinman to death. And he said this because Charles Manson told him to. Charles Manson, the alleged user and master manipulator who supposedly only cared about himself, knew that he was going down for life, and he wanted to save his brother, Bobby Beausoleil, from a similar fate. As Manson put it, better one of us out than two of us in. And to this day, despite anything he says, Bobby Beausoleil knows that this is the real truth.
This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.